You know, when I first watched Helluva Boss, I was not a particularly big fan of Loona. Her drama struck me as being a little passé, to be blunt. Adult adolescent is distant towards bumbling father figure and struggles to find meaningful connections in this crazy world. Wow, what a headline. Never heard that one before. Let me guess, she secretly cares about them and it comes through in key moments, complete with slow, pensive musical score. Yes! Yes! It's like poetry, it rhymes! The way I see it, tropes are popular for a reason. They're not inherently bad, but after a certain point of cultural saturation, you need some level of forethought and novelty to keep them fresh. And this story, at a glance, does not do that. No, as with so much of Helluva Boss, it just heedlessly barrels forward into the cliché, knowing that most of its audience does not give a shit. And indeed, they do not. That's what a lot of the critics don't get. This show, by virtue of its success, really has no incentive to change. We're not the target audience. That's kids in middle school. And although many of us are rightly frustrated by a loss of potential, we should remember that, in the end, the joke is on us. After all, we're still watching. Well, you have to have a sense of humor about these things. Like that design, holy shit. I think my first thoughts upon seeing it were, guys, DeviantArt's that way. Of course, that observation is almost a cliché in and of itself. But come on, we all know that's the real reason anyone remembers her. That stereotypical fursuit face, that ridiculous outfit, that figure which looks like the artist couldn't stop masturbating for even a second in the process of making it. It's so blatant that it almost loops back around to being awesome. This is a character clearly designed to ruin kids' lives from the start, like Totally Spies, consolidated into a single existence. I can respect that. Certainly more than the front-facing story anyway. And actually, upon some considered thought, there are several things about Loona that I can appreciate. That's why I'm making this, to provide some attention to the better part of Loona's narrative, the hidden part, given form by the subconscious and spoken in screams. Here's my thesis. On a fundamental level, Loona represents the fate of the new generation, both in terms of aesthetic corruption and an ethic of apathy and disregard. This degeneration represents an appalling crime, both on the part of the individual and the world, at a level that transcends common law and sentiment. It is a spiritual violation. Phew. Let's start with the aesthetic. I've already commented on Loona's design, but the normies in the audience might not understand how deep it goes. You may have realized that there's a furry component to her appearance, but did you notice that she has a skunk tail? Or that she gorges herself at every opportunity? Or that her socks leave her feet exposed, despite what is surely plenty of toxic debris around the streets of hell? What about the fact that she's implied to have syphilis? Or that she's a toxic person? All of these things would have been immediately apparent to a true disciple. You see, Loona in this setting represents not just the furry subculture, but sexual fetishism as a whole. At least, as much of it as can be contained within a single entity. And specifically, its potential for destructive behavior. More than once, she uses said fetishism, in one form or another, to seduce random people into a relationship, which quickly becomes abusive. Furthermore, when she herself is attracted to another person, she speaks inappropriately to them right out of the gate. She's hot! That's like one of the first things she says to the dingo bee woman in episode 8. Like someone freshly coming into a new community and not knowing, or caring, about the proper rules of conduct. Consent, respect, these things are vital to any such community remaining healthy. But Loona struggles with this, violating professional standards and threatening to cause fights with her ill-considered Eros. And it goes further than that, too. It's commented on that people regularly slobber over Loona, even in her wolf form. And at times she's referred to simply as Blitzo's Hellhound, defining her solely by her fetishistic label. Imagine if you referred to someone as you're Asian, or some other racial group. That wouldn't be cool. That wouldn't be in the cool category. On a personal level, when she was going to the furry party and everyone howled to greet her, I died of cringe and had to be resuscitated. That wasn't considerate towards me. But my favorite part of this, someone on Facebook pointed this out. Loona has a human form in the show, but apparently that human form has a different body type, with her hips being considerably less exaggerated. Almost as if the artist is trying to say, yeah, this is where the real shit is. Just stay away from Air Bud, okay? Chasers, objectification, increasing tolerance, etc. Now, don't worry, I am not going to make a 2-hour video about how porn is evil and destroying the country or something. I leave that to the conservatives, who are very normal. But these are issues that such subcultures have to face. Issues that tend to be exacerbated the further they are from the mainstream. Loona exemplifies such problems. And you know what? It doesn't seem like she improves much as the story goes on. Although that may be attributed to the point of ethics. Now, at this point, I would like to remind people that fetishism is one of, if not the central theme of the series as a whole. It pretty much kicks off the whole plot, it's the reason the protagonists are able to do literally anything, and a lot of the creators' previous work involved furries doing furry things. They even go out of their way to show a child falling into fetishism himself, which I don't know if that's as wholesome as they think it is. I mean, it culminates in them buying a child. Let's stop talking about this. The point is that it's prevalent. And on an aesthetic level, Loona fits into this ensemble of fuck by serving as a core object of desire, for better or mostly worse. Granted, there are characters that are more blatant about their lust, but on that subversive level, that quiet and warping fetishism the series is known for, she clearly reigns supreme. Like a black, greasy stain on the page. It's incredible. Some people might say Blitzo is a better example, but I disagree by simple virtue of the fact that his design isn't inherently sexual. Looking at him, you can conceivably imagine him in a different context. But I defy you to find one person who looked at Loona and didn't immediately think of fur piles. You can't. They don't exist. At least not on the internet. That meta element gives Loona the edge. It's like the black stain is trying to bleed into reality. And it really says something about society. Because if it's producing something like this, what is next? Where is the new generation going to go from here? It's like a horror movie. And that sense of dread and mild disgust greatly elevates her character. Because you know that for a significant chunk of the population, that disgust is something else altogether. And that fundamental disagreement of values, of principles, of beauty itself, that is far more galling than a man simply waving a knife. Speaking of horror, there is one more component to the aesthetic we need to cover: social media. You see, outside of the fetishism, one thing that Loona definitely likes is her phone. Yep. Being symbolic of the new generation, she of course is constantly fucking around on that thing. Work? Office meetings? Meh. Sorry, I'd rather check Twitter instead. And what is on Twitter exactly? Is it something more enriching than the world around her? Is she reading about Ben Franklin? Is she looking at a painting from the Renaissance? Nope. Just this shit. Yeah. This is symbolic of a very different kind of aesthetic corruption on the part of the things Loona surrounds herself with. Cheap, stupid crap, which looks like a lame afterthought, and yet it enraptures her. She sees nothing better around her, and perhaps, in her case, there is nothing better. Capitalism. Actually, that ties into the second, less well-remembered definition of fetish. Yes, when you hear the word you probably just think of pyrocynical or something, but in the original definition, fetishism can also refer to the worship of an inanimate object for some perceived spiritual power or significance. One example of this would be the use of carved idols in old West African religious groups, but the presence and practice of it persists today, for protection, for ceremony, for more. You see? In her slavish devotion to the small screen of shit, Loona is drawing on the original definition of the term in a decidedly less noble sense. She is treating it as her cross, her altar, her object of worship, even if she wouldn't call it as such, and conferring to it as a source of comfort and protection. It is vile, and paints a decidedly unflattering portrait of the new generation, further compounding the sexual fetishism seen before. In the new generation, there is the potential for greater expression and plentiful resources. There is also this shit. Rot. And there is an additional, humorous layer of irony to this, but that lies in the next point, Loona's ethics, or lack thereof. Loona is a demon. You might think that's a pretty open and shut case when it comes to morality, but in this setting, there is a surprising range of virtue amongst the cast. Moxie and Millie are genuinely affectionate and loyal to each other, with Moxie in particular questioning the ethics of their work. Fizzarali goes out of his way to tell a disabled child that they can do anything, and Asmodeus, the sin of lust, stops the narrative to tell kids the importance of getting consent. Of course, this is typically done in a very hackneyed and in-your-face manner, as if the creator abruptly decided to pick up a megaphone and say, "This is what you're supposed to think!" But it carries another message with it as well. Namely, that this bitch doesn't get an out on that front, and I effectively have an excuse to critically examine her conduct. Loona has a job, or at least she's supposed to have a job. She serves as the receptionist for her father's company, helping to connect desperate clients to her coworkers and manage meetings. But because she's too busy with her phone and magazines, Loona frequently neglects her work, causing miscommunications and potentially lost business for the firm. This is a reference to the idea that the millennial, Zoom, whatever the stupid new generation is called, is lazy. And in this particular case, can you honestly disagree? Regardless of her sensory desires, she has an obligation to bring her best to the business that hired her, and she chooses not to, because she thinks they're less important than her phone. Think of how insulting that is. Think of what it means to be placed lower than this insipid nonsense. In any respectable workplace, she would be immediately flogged for the transgression. But because of the power of nepotism, her father not only provided her the role, but also shields her from the consequences of her actions. Others criticize Loona for her sloppy performance and poor attitude, but Blitzo steps in and tells all of them to fuck off. It doesn't matter because he likes her, and that means she's entitled to do whatever she wants. Some people view this as being wholesome, like, oh, Blitzo actually cares about his daughter, that's so sweet. No, it's horrible. She's horrible, and so are you. It represents not only the potential unfairness of the workplace, but the inherent disparity of opportunity that exists in the first place. Where would Loona be if she didn't have an entrepreneur for a father? Probably sucking shit through a straw. And yet plenty of imps that would work much harder and be much more courteous are left to die in the street, while she sits on her butt and looks at a blank screen. Not only does Loona unfairly benefit from this connection, but she also takes it for granted, showing a lack of gratitude and a pattern of behavior that can only be described as entitled. Aggressively entitled. Does the new generation appreciate the gifts they've been given? Do they try to make the most of things? No, Loona suggests. No. Most of them do not. And it leads to at times catastrophic consequences. Of course, the full picture is a bit more complicated, but come on. This is unacceptable. See, here's the thing. Loona isn't just lazy, but also actively disrespectful and cruel to her coworkers. She steals their food, regularly insults them, at times physically assaults them, and calls Moxie fat with the seemingly express purpose of instilling a body image disorder in him. Which may or may not be working. Hey, don't get me wrong, I like making people feel bad too. But if you're gonna go that route, you should at least have the decency to apply it to the girls as well. What, only the men are acceptable targets? That's not fair. That's not fair. That's not fair. That's not fair. Once, Blitzo actually tries to correct her. Gently, mind you. She beats the shit out of him. Are there any real consequences for this? No. No. A resounding no. Loona represents every stereotype of a toxic coworker, all with a frightening sheen of the new generation. Many have tried to destroy it, but evil never dies. It is only reborn. And with the advent of new technology, it has become more subtle, more terrible than ever before. In fact, from an ethical standpoint, one could argue that Loona incorporates all of the 7 deadly sins into her character. Sloth, gluttony, and wrath are pretty obvious. Pride is apparent in her response to criticism, jeering comments, and general disregard for others. We spent an entire section on lust. She envies the dingo bee woman for being attractive, and in the shitty one-bedroom apartment that she lives in with Blitzo, rent-free I might add, she demands the one bed they have, thus completing the ensemble with greed. And it just keeps going. One key component of Loona's story was about how she struggled to find connections in this crazy world. What do you think happens when she gets over her anxiety and actually starts talking with some of the extras? Do you think she's cool? Or do you think she turns into a diva there, too? At one point, Blitzo is wondering why his boyfriend/disaster friend has been putting off their monthly prostitution sesh. And Loona immediately says, he probably hates you. He's probably getting bored of you, and is just icing you out. That's what people do when they want to be really passive-aggressive about it. I should know, I do that all the time. I rest my case, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, 5% of the time we see a softer side of her, usually when she sees someone who reminds her of herself. But that doesn't excuse the other 95% of the time. To that I say, 1,000,000 years, dungeon! In portraying the new generation as having this kind of moral decay, Vivziepop paints a dire picture for the future of society. Like Twin Peaks, The Return, if it was written by Dougie. What does it mean when a society acts like this? Let alone one that doesn't properly prosecute it. Is it just some harmless fun, or can it carry real consequences? These are the questions the audience is meant to ask. They are also rhetorical questions. But the supreme comedy of this point in Loona's character actually comes from Karl Marx. I'm not kidding. Now, I know people view anyone who mentions that name as the second coming of Joseph Stalin, so let me put your mind at ease. I'm not a communist. I kicked 2 homeless people on the way back from work today, so don't worry, I'm a good citizen. But I do think he had some interesting things to say on this matter. Karl Marx wrote about fetishism extensively. No, not that kind, although that would have been funny. Rather, he commented on commodity fetishism, which is specifically about viewing objects as static and magical vessels of economic value, rather than the result of an extensive and potentially exploitative web of human labor. By it, transactions are seen as a relationship between things, say, money and merchandise, rather than between people. It's a way of obfuscating the nature of production. But the joke of it all, in Loona's case, is that her fetish, her phone, her magazines, are inherently related to social media. They're supposed to represent people, but she chooses that over the actual people in her life. It's hilarious. So, Loona has twisted hearts and twisted PPs. What does this mean? It means that she is a horrible person, and that the new generation is doomed. There's no need for the suspense. We all probably knew that coming into the video, actually. She destroys more than she builds. And with her apathy, it seems likely that the 95-5 ratio will continue onwards for eternity. She is a living crime scene, a national tragedy, one that befits the fate of an entire people, barreling onwards to oblivion. And yet, what does it mean to write off an entire people? To crush their hopes in an onslaught of fetishism and disregard? To incinerate all that you touch? This leads to the third, secret part of the thesis. Because there is one other meaningful part of Loona's character. Something that would only be apparent to someone who has no life and went over the series with a fine-tooth comb. You see, Loona is actually smart. What? Yeah, that's the real twist here. In the episode Ghost Fuckers, Moxie is handling the finances of the group, and he's having a meltdown for the whole episode trying to make the numbers tie. Loona, of course, does nothing, except for presumably calling him Tubbo every so often in the distance because it's so funny. At the end of the episode, Moxie has a breakthrough and says that he has solved the ambiguous business problem. But then Loona looks over and says, I think you forgot to carry the 2. And Moxie breaks down again, realizing that she's right. At a glance, Loona was able to instantly identify his error and understand what he was trying to solve. In other words, it's implied that she's secretly quite proficient in mathematics. And that's not all. Earlier in the series, she's able to instantly calculate the angle a building has to fall in to save her coworkers. And when Moxie claims to have lost 2 pounds in a week, at a quick glance, she's able to determine whether he actually is 2 pounds lighter, and make her own judgment. That is an incredible level of precision. And there are also other hints of her capability too. Loona is the only member of the crew to actually know about human disguises early on. She points out that the guy who blew up the wall could just have used the door. And of course, she's very capable in direct combat, instantly defeating the guy that made Moxie and Blitzo shit their pants. She has possibly the most potential out of anyone in the company. If she just took the cock out of her ass, she could probably save the business and push everyone to greater things. But then, in response to that, she'd probably just say, I don't want to take the cock out of my ass. I just want Moxie to have an eating disorder. And there it is, folks. The tragedy of the new generation. They have access to more information than anyone has in history, more potential than anyone else to make the world a better place. But they choose not to. No, they'd rather just vote for Trump and watch as the predictable happens, either reveling in the destruction or pretending that they weren't obviously conned. And hey, Trump is pretty much a Helluva Boss character in real life already, so it fits. It fits perfectly. This is Loona's true crime, even beyond her indolence and fetishism and pride. By refusing to live up to her potential, she cheats the world out of all she can be, and that is an offense that deserves worse than death. And yet, I'm sure the 2 keyboard warriors who have suffered this far have been screaming, Hater! Hater! You're just jealous! Yeah, well, at least I'm not a 9-year-old asking about sex work. Hey! What's that thing you were saying earlier? It's not her fault! Yeah, that. Thank you. Now, the arbitrary little caricature person I conjured up can be easily dismissed along with myself. But in their delusional raving, there is a point. Loona is pretty bad, but then so is the world around her. And I'm not talking about the stupid sob story they give for her background, because, who gives a shit? I'm talking more about the current environment she finds herself in. Where is she working? At IMP, an assassination agency. And more importantly, her boss is Blitzo, who is stupid, obsessive, angry, stupid, and infantile. You said stupid twice. Yeah, that's intentional. His idea of a marketing campaign is something straight from a child's lemonade stand. His idea of a business meeting is to fart openly in the other characters' faces. Imagine Michael Scott if he was really unfunny. Imagine if his idea of comedy was just saying swear words, like a 14-year-old who recently learned about the concept. Do the others like him? Would you? Despite being given a very powerful artifact by the aristocracy of Hell, essentially privileging his business over the rest of his race, he's still on the verge of bankruptcy. Because he sucks. Now, here's a question. Would you be motivated to give your best in this situation? It's easy to say you would. It's easy to say you'd be an abolitionist back in the antebellum era, or that you'd oppose the rise of the Third Reich. But would you really? Do you even believe it enough to lie? Loona was wrong to check out at this juncture. We all know that. She was wrong to succumb to indolence and moral decay. But it's hard, and moral fact does not diminish that difficulty. Blitzo represents the outside world, and all of its transparent stupidity and bile. It may not be intentionally malevolent, but that hardly matters. It weighs down everything around it, and presents an idea of immutability. It is hard to be inspired in the face of such things. Humans are inherently social creatures. There's no reason to believe demons are any different. Therefore, perhaps what Loona needed, even more than self-respect, was something inspiring. She needed something that mattered to her, something to build towards, something that could make a difference, at least to her. You see this same lack in the real world. Anything to the left of shooting the homeless for sport is dismissed as communism, and anything deeper than shallow self-interest or nihilistic realpolitik is dismissed as naive, or worse, controversial. That one's my favorite because it reveals their fundamental cowardice. And cowardice cannot build. Not in the real world, not in this one. And so, Loona's environment is to blame as well. And the real tragedy of it all is that Loona sometimes shows signs of improvement. When she's shown genuine moral beauty, she's capable of pause, and capable of change. It's not much, but it's something, which in her case is significant. Even Blitzo, in all of his stupidity and vice, earns a smile from her when his attempts at affection come through. She is not an immutable existence. She can be better. But this reaches its peak in Mission Orphan Time, where their target is Mr. Rogers. Is he secretly a pedophile? Does he rape puppies in his spare time? No, actually, for once in the show's run, he's a genuinely good person. At least from what we see. Loona has these questions as well, but when it becomes apparent that he means his kindness, she can't help but wither before it. She hesitates to kill him. She tries to make him comfortable. And despite her putrid father's objections, she's patient, watching as he says goodbye to all of his loved ones, and the people he's helped. At the end of the day, she lets him watch the sunset, and listens to him. He calls her a friend, and encourages her to show the world who she really is. I don't think they'd like the real me. I know I would. And, smiling gently, she decides to reveal herself. She sheds her human disguise and looks to him. He looks at her. And he screams in terror. Things quickly deteriorate from there. Loona is horrified, shooting him through the leg, and Blitzo brutally beats him to death. And that's how the episode ends. This reflects the real world as well. Not the character, of course, that's more fictional than fucking Bigfoot. But this moment is where reality shows up and says hello. Because here's the thing. Loona, Blitzo, Moxie, at the end of the day, they are demons. By definition, they are spirits of evil, and the range in their demeanor is ultimately immaterial. They are below heaven, and below humanity, a worthless existence fit only to be ground under the heels of the state. No matter what Loona did, that truth would not change, and it never will. Not in the eyes of the world. You see, there are two parts to this. As awful as many of the systems in the world are, they often exist for your benefit. Factory farming, modern slave labor, all manner of cruelty and woe. They are done to provide you with cheaper products and a sense of security. I didn't ask for that! So, as long as you benefit from it, you're still a part of the system. Or do you think the child starving in the Philippines cares that you ensconced yourself in deliberate ignorance to more comfortably enjoy his products? You still share responsibility. You still are grotesque. How often would our family step over others to help us? How often can it be said that they don't care as long as their own brood is safe? How many times do politicians arbitrarily change their views on one specific issue once they realize someone they care about is affected? Disgusting. Disgusting. But, in a sense, well-intentioned. And almost worse for it. This is what Blitzo represents. Apart from his stupidity, he would kill the whole world for his daughter. And in that, there is security as well as abomination. Because, you see, outside of the nation, the city, the family, there's a lot of people who don't give two shits about you. They don't care about your struggles, your dreams, your heart. They only see the truth. And they're quite willing to step on you for their own ends. That's what this man represents. Even someone as good as him couldn't help but scream in horror. Even he fought for his own life in the end. In other words, it is the torment of evil benevolence against the horror of apathetic truth. Loona's sadness at the end of the episode is about more than just a man dying. It's her being reminded of a fundamental truth in a way that reaches her, even in her ultra-numb state. and that is a terrifying thing to consider. This is the fate of the new generation. For, as Loona was born in the wrong space, they were born in the wrong time. Born too late for a world that isn't dying. Born too early to not exist. Born just in time to suffer at the hands of a machine that will slot them in its own box and treat them as a product or trash, on a spiritual level. For what can be said of the spirit in this world? There is no room for imagination or love, no room for freedom, only the push for ever more exploitation, ever more perverse, ever more merciless, and she will obey, trying to convince herself that the choice was wholly her own. Of course, by the end of this, the front-facing story will probably belch out some happy ending for her, wholly unearned. But we know the truth. Behind the thick lines and endless pretense, we know the hidden reality. Huh. Demons. To be considered paradigmatically evil, to essentially be forced into a losing battle against the world by birth. Could there be a more hideous fate? But this is what Loona faces in the end. And this is what the new generation is fated for as well. Because these are enforced ideas. In Loona's case, it's by the sentiment of humanity and angels. In the case of the new generation, it's because their elders still have all the money. Even if their judgments weren't inherently true, they would make them true. If the younger crowd chose to fall, they're the ones who pushed. And it sucks. Of course, one might say that the world has always sucked. In some sense, they have a point. But I think these people are missing the bigger picture. Indeed, the character of mankind has not changed, but its power, and the subsequent consequences of that character, have. Connect the dots yourself. It even applies to the case of fetishism. After all, was it not the neglect and distance of the child's father that caused him to fall into it? Is that not the implication of the narrative? Is it not the disconnect and at times cynical provision of our culture that makes individuals more susceptible to such things, and the more antisocial applications of it? Mind you, fetishism isn't inherently evil. But then, this is Helluva Boss. Everything must be interrogated. There are many reasons for the world being as such. In closing, I'll just say this. It is hard to care for others. It can require sacrifice. It can be dangerous. But that doesn't mean it's right to disregard them. You've seen Loona's character, hopefully with clearer eyes after this. You've seen her difficulties, her potential, her failings. Perhaps you still view her with sympathy. You wish to see her potential realized, her struggles mean something in the end, even if she is a demon. I'm not one of these people, mind you. I mostly just view her as a joke, as do most people with a functioning brain. But ultimately that doesn't matter, because I think my final answer encompasses both positions. So, what is the lesson here? What is the takeaway? What is the solution to this social conundrum, this Gordian knot, this problem of evil? I'll tell you. Destroy everything. Everything that causes you pain. Destroy this wicked world that produces iniquity and calls it justice. Destroy! Is that not what God does? Is that not the answer that everyone is coming to anyway? Lay waste to this awful place. Wipe out all traces of evil and sadness. Ignore their excuses, for they mean nothing to the broken. And just destroy, destroy, destroy! Until there's nothing left but dust. Or, if you're incapable of that, just be kind to your fellows and call it rebellion. I don't know. Honestly, I find those that try to artificially paint virtue as cool to be pretty pathetic. But there is something to be said for radical kindness. After all, it isn't a sufficient condition to better the world, but it is a necessary one. And, of the prime virtues, it is the only one the average person can realistically attain, making its absence all the more pathetic. Let us strive for a more perfect world, independent of space and time. Let the new generation meet or challenge their fate with courage, and find a meaning that isn't transparently geared towards exploiting them. Let us be friends, and eradicate all evil in the world. Let the writing in this show stop sucking so bad. These are the things we hope for. And as we look away from Loona, the lost and damned avatar of the new generation, let us do what we can to make those hopes a reality.